Hello, welcome back to the channel. So out of all of the planets we have been to so far, Amphoreus has definitely been the most contentious out of all of them. Some people really love it and think it is the best one so far, while a lot of other people think that it is terrible and a waste of time. I think that a lot of this comes down to mainly if you play for the story, or if you play for the gameplay. Because while I have enjoyed the story a lot, I do think that the gameplay side has kind of suffered a bit because of the bigger emphasis on the story. Though I do think it is kind of getting better as of late, because the main problem for a while, besides the whole, power group thing, which I will get to in a second, was just the lack of content. Only having 2, maybe 3 events just makes it feel like there's just nothing to do for most of the patch. Obviously, basically all of these games have the problem where, at the end, in the last week, there's nothing to do. But it shouldn't feel like that for most of the patch, especially since the endgame modes only rotate every 2 weeks. I feel like it should be either every week, or at least, one rotates every week. The first week, MOC would rotate, and then the second week, Pure Fiction would rotate, and then the third week, it would be, APOC, and then it would repeat the cycle. That way, it feels like there's always at least something to do. Because just having dailies is only going to get you so far, and a lot of people have kind of just stopped caring about dailies at all. And yeah, you do have the story, which will take a decent amount of time. A person of the story now is only 8 to 10 hours, but that's also only going to last you so long for a 6-week patch. It's gonna last you maybe a week or 2 at max, and that's if you're really taking your time. A lot of people do it in 1 or 2 days. Though, like I said, it is getting better. We got a new endgame mode, even if people seem to be a bit mixed on it. I do enjoy it for what it is, though I do think it could use some tweaking to it. And we are getting another mode next patch, which I am very excited for. But besides just the lack of content, it also kind of creates a lack of Jades. It's pretty bad with how many 5 stars are necessary for teams to even work at all. In this patch from events, we're only getting 2,150 Jades, which is only 1 tentpole. And yeah, we do get 10 more from the login event, but even then, that's still only 20, which is pretty bad. We are at least getting Dan for free, which does kind of make up for that, but especially if we aren't going to get any more 4 stars, we should be getting more Jades to make up for that. Especially with the kind of lack of budget options for a lot of teams, because the only real ones right now are Remembrance MC and Gallagher for most teams. Maybe Herda, but only really in Herda teams. Maybe Team Unit, even though Team Unit is nowhere close to how good Sunday is. Now, besides just the lack of content, a lot of people's problems have mainly just been with power creep and the whole HP thing. Now, I have already made a video about power creep, so I won't harp on this too much, and if you want to watch that video, I will put a link in the description. But while I do think that some people do kind of exaggerate how bad it actually is, since besides maybe Break, most of the 2.S characters can clear content fine. It is mainly the 1.S characters that have, the problems like Sealy. However, it is still a pretty big problem with just how much better the new characters are, especially with how hard a lot of the content is pushing the new characters with the buffs and even some of the bosses, the new one, which is countered by shields, which is basically just pushing Dan, the main counter. Obviously all these games do that to some extent. The problem is how much they're being pushed, especially in MOC with it only having 1 buff. You should be incentivized to interact with the buff, but it shouldn't feel so required that you can't beat it if you don't have the characters to interact with it. Or if it is required, at least make it broad enough that a lot of characters can use it. Now, I do actually like a lot of the new characters, and I do think the devs have done a good job at making each character feel unique and exciting, but it shouldn't feel like they're the only good option. And I do think that the main thing that we just need is more buffs, but the current rate of them is just not enough, since we don't even know if we're going to get any more at all, since they didn't announce any in the 3.6 livestream. And if they don't announce any in the 3.7 livestream, I think people are going to start getting really annoyed. Because we have seen that buffs can help a lot with Silver Wolf, Kafka being really good now, though High Silence did also kind of help with that. Even Blade and Jingli are a lot better than they were before. Now, on the other side of this, I do think that the story has been the best part of Amphoreus, and to be honest, it's not really close. Has it been perfect? No, some parts feel kind of dragged out, and the presentation in places could definitely be better, but overall, I do think that has been great, and has honestly kind of carried a lot of patches like 3.4. One big problem I think Pentagony had was that some characters felt like they just had nothing to do. Like Boot Hill, for example, felt like he just didn't really have a purpose in the story besides just doing one thing in the ending and that's it. And like some characters like barely had any screen time, like Sparkle barely had any screen time at all. Like, but with Amphoreus, it has felt like every character has had time to be fleshed out and have like their moment shine. Even characters that didn't have as much screen time, like Cypher, it still felt like we learned, you know, a good amount about them, and they actually had a purpose in the story. I think like the main complaint I've seen from a lot of people is that it's too long. And like, yeah, Amphoreus is like the most story we have gotten. I think someone did the math that it was like almost 40 hours of story, I believe. Which, you know, does make sense because we've gotten a new story every single patch. And while I do think that some of them could be cut down, like maybe cut down to like 6 or 5 hours maybe, I feel like people take this too far. Like I've seen people say that you should shorten them down to like 2 hours, which I'm sorry, but that just would not work with how Amphoreus is. I feel like 3.4 was like the perfect length, where it felt long enough to feel impactful and let all the story, you know, take place, but not so long that it felt just kind of dragged out. But like at the same time, you have plenty of time to do the story. Like, I feel a big problem is just a lot of people trying to do it all in one go, which I do get to some extent to try and avoid spoilers. But like, you have 6 weeks to do it. You have plenty of time. And that's not to say that like, they can't make improvements on the story. They absolutely can. I think the problem is like both. It's the story is a bit too long, but I think it's also people trying to rush through the story. At the end of the day, is Amphoreus perfect? No, absolutely not. I mean, even the implementation of Remembrance feels kind of questionable with how they went about it, with almost all of them being a part of the same team for some reason, so I just feel like there wasn't really much of a point to it. I do think Amphoreus has been great overall, and it is like the most invested I feel a lot of people have been in a while, you know, at least more than Pentagony. I like a lot of the new characters. I feel like it's like everyone wants to know what's happening next with the story, which like makes sense with it being the main focus. I do think like besides MOC, the endgame I do think has been good, even if with the HP thing being kind of annoying because it does just sometimes feel like you're just hitting a brick wall. And they do like reuse certain bosses too much. Like, do they need to stop using Kool-Aid so much? But like, I think the main problem is that people think it's either 10 out of 10 or it's trash. When I think that there's a lot more nuance to it than that. There's some good parts to it and there's some bad parts to it. But I think with, you know, the new game mode coming next patch and the climax of the story, I am overall excited for what's coming next for the game. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Like, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.